bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's a Tuesday, so we're taking your hashtag Tuesday thoughts on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. We're taking your hashtag Tuesday thoughts in the Twitch live chat, twitch.tv/Soccer Down Here. You can also email us, soccerdownhere@gmail.com, if that's more your speed. All three work to get your Tuesday thoughts to us. We've got thoughts tonight on Portland and Orlando for a CONCACAF Champions League berth tonight in the MLS's back tournament final. Regular season resumes tomorrow with Dallas and Nashville. We'll get into that. We've got issues in Scotland that we've got to talk about, because you've got to look at what's happening over there and say, could that happen here as MLS starts to return? We'll have that conversation. We'll talk about silly season as it's starting to ramp up. All kinds of different things today. Where do you want to start, John?
Where do I want to start? I guess we should start with the MLS's back coming to a conclusion tonight down in Orlando. And I mean, it's been a great tournament, and you have these two sides going at it with Portland and Orlando City to determine who gets that berth for a CONCACAF Champions League. It's been a fun run, and it comes to a conclusion tonight.
Well, before we get into the game tonight, what have you learned during the MLS's back tournament?
What have I learned? Wow.
Maybe you haven't learned anything. I figure you've learned something during the tournament.
Well, and this is completely and totally a league-based thing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the final. I said the tournament as a whole. What have you learned during this tournament?
It's more of a logistics thing more than anything else, where if a league, and this also applies to the NWSL as well, but if you have a league set forth a plan and you have your players and your personnel fully invest in your idea, you see what can happen when it comes to hosting professional sports and professional leagues and things like that. I think that, and that's from an on-the-field perspective and a hosting perspective. From a television perspective, you get to see, the imagination of TV partners come to the fore, and how can we make this more of a not necessarily an interactive experience, although you do see that with the engagement that is there for fans as a part of this. But from a TV production perspective, all of the different elements that we got to see that were added to it, so you could make up for the loss of fans that were there to be engaged on site, and you could sit there and be more engaged in the on-air product in and of itself. So I think that it was I think it should be a learning experience for other leagues. And I think that it also should be a learning experience for the network, for any network that wants to do any kind of a sporting event, fans or not, about how you can add flavor and add depth to what's going on when it comes to an on-air product.
Did they accomplish that? You feel like they accomplished making
not
up
in a ratings sense. I'm not
talking about ratings. I'm not talking ratings. I'm talking about production. I'm going on what you said. Do you think they accomplished making up for the absence of fans with the production?
I think so. I think, and I'm taking all of the logos aside, and that stuff didn't bother me one bit. I understood the notion of having the mega billboard on the far side where you had your sponsors and things like that. For me, I enjoyed hearing coaches. I wish I'd heard more of it when there were those times. I'll give you the Ben Olsen example early on in the tournament, when you had a sideline microphone catching up with Ben Olsen, and Ben Olsen is just he's going off. I wish I'd had more of that. I understand the notion of muffling sounds when it comes to choice words.
Please have a naughty option somewhere in the chain.
Yes, that would have been the one thing that was missing for me was the naughty option. But to be able to hear the insights of the coaches, and when San Jose was playing, and you got to hear Matias Almeida discuss things, but at the same time, you also heard his second sit there and translate for him immensely quickly to get those thoughts put forth. Those kinds of things I thought were stuff that I wish you could hear more of. I know that coaches like Almeida weren't fans of that because he thought it was intrusive. But for me, it was those kinds of things. Hearing the communication, we got into it early in the tournament with goalies, and you're hearing the goalkeeper sitting there and directing traffic. I wish I'd heard more of that. but it was a great idea. I wish they'd stuck to it more.
They didn't go away from it.
But like I said, for me, I'd like to hear more of it. But I know that it's a delicate dance in trying to integrate the natural sound with what you're getting as a part of the presentation.
There's two different things. Talking and having coaches' instructions on is a delicate dance. Having goalkeepers yelling on set pieces, there's no delicate dance. And we heard that the whole time. So they didn't take that away. I like the mics on the field. I like the mics for the game action. All that's great. I understand the coaches' issues with, at times, how intrusive it could be. I love it as a viewer, but at times it was intrusive, and a coach is going to push back on that at times. I don't need the mid-game interviews. I don't think that gives you anything except frustrate coaches. They don't want to do that. Yeah. So I would do away with that. I don't know, the stuff as a fan, as somebody who gets into the tactics, I enjoy when you've got the hydration break and you're hearing what the teams are trying to do. That's great. I also understand the pushback from coaches about not wanting that live. Let's put it in a post game or a pregame for the next game. Let's do that so they don't feel like, well, if the other team's watching the broadcast, they might pick up some things that or what? Just have it delayed. Don't have a separate camera and a separate tape machine lay onto it, and then so here's what he said early in the huddle. If it comes to the fore, if it comes to an accomplished event, then you can roll back to it and sit there and say, "This is what happened. Here's what Matias Almeida said back in the huddle in the hydration break," and then you actually see you're kind of putting what Almeida said in the huddle after the fact to prove that what he did in the huddle actually did come to fruition. If I'm a coach, I still don't want that. It's got to be after the game's done. Use it, but don't use it during the game, because if you noticed, there were coaches from a lot of teams, and you can see them on camera quite often, sitting behind the bench area with headphones and with tablets. You think they weren't listening to the broadcast, trying to pick things up? It's very possible that they were. So I get that from a coach's perspective. I think you can find a balance there. Let's think of how American football is presented, because I think it's become the preeminent TV sport, at least in this country. And where you have coaches mic'd up, and you're starting to get to where you have players mic'd up. The coaches stuff, are you airing that live?
No.
When do you air it? Maybe at halftime, and not like tactical stuff, not coaching stuff, not strategy stuff, but reaction kind of stuff or whatever.
Rah-rah reaction stuff.
You might get anything coach-related post-game. You might get that. Christopher says, do you actually think teams would watch a broadcast just to see the other team's huddle? Seems a bit pointless. Teams should focus on playing their own game. You don't want to overthink things. That's why you have a bunch of coaches. Like, go back and look at some of the games. You've got people in the back with a tablet paying attention to what's going on, because in these games, one moment where you hear in a hydration break, for example, let's play the scenario. You've got San Jose in the hydration break. You've got that boom mic and the camera coming in tight to hear what Matias Almeida is instructing his team to do in the last 15 minutes of the half. You're the other team. You don't know what they're going to do, but if you get that information, you can adjust.
Absolutely.
And that's important. That's very, very important. So any edge you can get, you're going to take it. I think you have to be careful with that. If Marcelo Bielsa is sending people to watch training sessions, you're going to have somebody watching a broadcast if you're getting all this live sound. That's for sure. Almeida would probably do it to other coaches. Absolutely.
I mean, Oscar Pareja was in one of those pool lifeguard chairs watching the match I think it was last weekend. He was watching one of the matches off in a corner someplace. So, yeah, you're going to get those extra edges wherever you can get them.
That's completely different. You're watching the game to watch a game. I'm talking about hearing what you're not supposed to hear. You're not supposed to hear the other team's tactical instructions. It's great for us sitting at home. It's really cool. I like it. But if you're that team or you're playing that team, you're going to either take advantage of that or you're going to be very upset about it. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, like watching a game I don't care about that. You can watch the game on the app anytime you want. I'm talking about in the game, because if I'm playing San Jose and I can pay attention to what they're saying in a moment where they're going to make adjustments and I can pick them up quicker than if I see them play out, I've gained an advantage from that. And sometimes that little bit of an advantage can decide a game. All the way around, coaches are always going to find whatever edge they can find. And Bielsa explained it with the training. And yeah, I'm with Chris. Like, teams training out in the open and doing things like that, they should be a little bit smarter about that too. I mean, Bielsa's guys aren't like breaking into facilities, and it's not even to the Patriots level of Spygate. But
yeah,
it's and he's explained it. He's crazy. He feels like he wants every piece of information, even if he already knows it. He feels like he wants to double check it. But that's down to what coaches are at this level. It is any edge you can find, you're going to exploit. So if you're able to see what the other team is talking about, you're going to take that. I mean, that's why when you hear and that's why these are, I think, just completely useless. Those little interviews in the half from each coaches aren't going to give anything away there.
No.
And so it's kind of pointless. Like, the only thing you get occasionally is an emotional reaction, which is interesting, or a goal scored against their team, which is not good, which happened multiple times in the tournament. So I like the extra sound. I think you do need to manage the coaching element of it maybe a little bit better, or coaches are going to pull off. I do like how they use the VAR and the referee sound,
yes,
and I hope they do that more. And even if it's delayed, I'm okay with that. If it can be live, even better. Please share that so we get a sense of what that works like. You've got to protect the referees in that, and that they're the ones who are pushing back on it, and I totally get it. They don't want a referee, either the VAR or the center, to look bad in a scenario. They don't want a conversation that is supposed to be private to change the perception of that referee. I totally understand that. You've got to, if you're the producer, director, you've got to protect them and dump out if you need to dump out, or not use it live, or use it later, or edit it, whatever. You need to protect them, but it's a great addition to the broadcast. I liked the mics embedded in the field. I thought we got some natural sound in games that we're just not used to hearing. That was pretty cool. I think the production was good. For what they had to work with, I think it was good. It did look very different than the games in stadiums. And that can be good or bad. Some people don't like the games in the big empty stadium. Some people do. It feels more normal. That's a personal preference. I don't know where the majority is on that. I thought they did the best they could with what they had to work with. I will be curious to see what they do in stadiums with no fans now from a TV production standpoint. Is it just going to be what you see? Are you going to use tarps? Are you going to use superimposed graphics and different elements? What is it going to look like to get the most out of the production that you have to work with? If you have no fans, how do you make up for that now in a bunch of different stadiums? I'll be curious to see if they take things that they learned in Orlando and take them to the other broadcasts around the country. Let's go to the on the field. What did you learn about MLS on the field during this tournament?
That 9 a.m. games really zap you, especially in Orlando.
Yeah, that's why they don't play them. It was a good idea in terms of TV, but it wasn't exploited properly. ESPN really didn't do anything with it. They just took it and did nothing. Which, to be fair, is what they've done with the Korean baseball organization as well. They took those games and treated them like afterthoughts and treated them like intrusions more than anything. They did the same with the 9 a.m. ESPN MLS games. It didn't work. The quality of play suffered. It was a worthwhile experiment that failed. So what else did you learn on the field?
Well, let's see. Now I'm having to sit here and think about that it takes a while, obviously, and this is the master of the understatement, yours truly, that it takes some teams, some players a while to get to full song. It takes folks a while to get back into playing shape, whether you're talking about the individual or the team. It just takes some teams a little while to get warmed up. and you're looking at, and I'm taking this tournament and I'm kind of separating it from what we normally see when it comes to the MLS in a regular season. That, going back to the original point that we made when the tournament started, you're looking at teams and individual situations and how they handle themselves in a group stage / knockout stage way to do things. Can I take some evidence of teams and apply it forward when it comes to getting back out there and being in a regular season schedule? I think we can. I think that you can look at what a guy like Jaap Stam did in Cincinnati and sit there and look at what he did to advance his team to get them further down the line. You do what you have to do in these situations. And I think that it speaks to how players can listen to coaches in these group stage knockout situations to get to an achieved goal. Is it going to help them when it comes to the regular season schedule? Don't know. But I think that you got to see new coaches and see how they handle situations like this. And for me, that was one of the things that I was looking at, was just how coaches look at these situations where you're not on a regular schedule and how they're looking at this tournament in a tournament format more than anything else.
What teams impressed you and what teams disappointed
Impressed? You? Well, obviously disappointed, obviously Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Impressed, obviously the two that are here in the last match of the tournament. I thought that, San Jose impressed me because, and this is probably going to be kind of a baseline statement, because it was entertaining. And I think that in a tournament format, you're looking for those moments of entertainment. We knew what San Jose could be and what they have been in regular matches. And I say that regular matches meaning the normal schedule as we look at it. But you look at the entertainment value, I guess, when you're looking at a tournament format. And to me, they were entertaining. And I think that we've seen the advancement of Matias Almeida and what we've seen in San Jose. I thought that LAFC was exposed once again for who they are. Fantastic offensive firepower, but problems at the back. So I don't know if I wasn't necessarily impressed with LAFC, I guess, and I wasn't necessarily disappointed with them either, knowing the holes that they have at the back. So I guess it was expected, but leaning toward disappointing. So I don't know, is that like a C+ or a B- for an LAFC?
You tell me. I have no idea.
That's just, it's everybody looks at the shiny object of an LAFC. Oh yeah, LAFC, they're going to be in the final. But once again, the issues that they had at the back, they were reinforced. And so it's just kind of like, okay, so you go into the playoffs and you kind of do what you've always done. You don't get past that group. So I guess I expected what I saw out of LAFC, so it didn't necessarily disappoint me because I knew kind of where they were getting into in the playoffs. Philadelphia, impressed with Philadelphia, obviously, with what we saw with them. Minnesota, I enjoyed watching them, so it's good to see them continue to grow. I know that we were concerned about not having Iko Parra at the back and how they would be, but they make a deep run in the tournament there. And then I guess Columbus, through their early knockout, I guess I expected more out of Columbus, so I guess I'm technically disappointed with what I saw out of Columbus. That's early returns, I guess, for me when it comes to the tournament.
Early returns, it's over, John. we're at the end, so those returns need to come quick.
Well, then fine. My early thoughts on the tournament on the whole, the first time you asked me the question about how the tournament wrapped up. How about that?
Okay. Let's run through it real quick and give some reactions. We've got a lot of people on Twitch that have reactions as well. What are you doing? Calm down. Chill on the Mountain Dew or whatever you're drinking. Group A, Orlando and Philadelphia were your top two, and they were both really impressive in this tournament. We'll see if Orlando can win a final tonight for the first time that they've been in one. They've been really good. Great defensively, very organized, and you're getting strong performances from Nani and from Chris Mueller to kind of carry them. Philadelphia, I thought, was one of the more impressive ones from a tactics perspective. I really like what Jim Curtin's doing. Shabilko was good. You need to find more goals if you're Philadelphia. Brendan Aronson, I think, really emerged in this tournament. I like Jose Martinez as the number 6 for that team. They're really good. I want to see what happens with them in this upcoming window. I want to see if Aronson and McKenzie have interest and completely changes what 2020 is for Philadelphia. New York City looks like a team still adjusting to a new manager, which is fair. I mean, they're talented, but it's fits and starts of when they look good. Miami, they still need a number 9. Nothing has changed with that. I do not understand the American soccer media hive mind at times where it's like people push back and say, well, yeah, Matuidi's a great signing, but they still need a number 9. And then the usual gang comes in and says, well, no, he's going to make them better. It's obvious he's going to make them better. He very well could make them better.
Yeah.
They still need a number 9. And they've said that. Like, when everybody's making that up, they've said it. They need somebody to score goals, and Matuidi's not that. So now that you've committed a designated player spot to a box-to-box midfielder who is outstanding, it's also 33, is that going to be enough to boost this team up? You still have to have somebody find the back of the net. So Miami is about what we thought they would be. We'll see if LGP makes them better defensively. He should. There should be a boost there, but I've just got concerns about their attack. They gave up 5 goals in the 3 games, which isn't good either, and we'll see if LGP makes that part better. Group B, San Jose was a lot of fun to watch. They've got to find some ways to tighten things up, but they're a fun team to watch. They're the neutral's dream, but yeah, at times they can get super loose and throw points away, and that's something that's got to change if they're going to get to a title contending kind of spot. Seattle looked like typical early season Seattle, just not that impressive, kind of lethargic. I have some questions about these issues Nico Lodero's been having. He missed a lot of the preseason and CONCACAF Champions League with a tendinitis issue. That doesn't just go away. So if he's not 100% all year, they're going to suffer. And I'm looking at Seattle to see if they make any moves in this upcoming transfer window, because I think they're going to need to make some. Vancouver was a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect anything out of them. They had 3 attackers missing, and they scored 5 goals. Good for Vancouver to get where they got to. It felt like they punched above their weight. And I feel like Chicago was a little bit of a disappointment. They weren't bad. They did win a game in the tournament, but they only scored 2 goals. That's got to change. They've got to get more from Beric, who they've put resources into. They've got to get more from their attacking players, or they're going to struggle again. I think they're better than they were. They haven't completely shown it yet. Rafael Vicky's going to have time, though, to change that. Toronto, New England, both finished on 5 in Group C. New England was really good defensively in the group stage, only gave up a goal. Matt Turner's reportedly getting some interest from European clubs. Toronto scored a bunch of goals. Io Akinola, I think, maybe is one of the emerging talents from the tournament, but Toronto conceded 5, which is uncharacteristic of them. Both teams were good, not great, but good. Neither one lost in the group stage. Montreal lost twice in the group stage. I expected a little bit more from them, but I'm still kind of figuring out what they're going to be. They started out really good under Thierry Henry. Maybe they've come back to earth a little bit, so let's see where they go the rest of the year. DC is what DC's been this season. Disappointing. They've got talent. They've got talented players. It doesn't look like it fits. It looks like a puzzle that the pieces don't fit, and you're trying to force it together. We'll see if that changes. Group D, Sporting Kansas City, they were my favorite coming into it. They did well. I expected more, but they did well. They've got a really good team. They're going to be a contender the rest of the way. Minnesota has emerged now as a title contender, in my opinion. I think you have to look at them that way. Luis Amarilla is legit. The defense, they were missing Ike Opara. That showed a little bit at times, although Jose Aja had a good tournament. Minnesota's got to continue to, I guess, just show that they are for real. I think they are at this point. I don't know if everybody else does. They're a Western Conference contender to me, and we'll see if they get there. RSL was about what we thought. They got a win, a draw, and a loss in the group stage. 4 points, that's pretty good. They go through. They're stingy defensively, only giving up 2 goals. They just don't have a lot going forward right now. They lost Jefferson Savarino. They lost a lot. So somebody's got to step up in the attack, or you've just got to make the decision that Damir Kreilach is going to be your number 9 and adjust the midfield around that and make it work. Colorado was a big disappointment. A lot of people were hyping up the Rapids. They gave up 7 goals in 3 matches. They were very disappointing. That was a problem. Group E, Columbus was very good. Columbus is in the elite group in the Eastern Conference, in my opinion. They didn't give up a goal in the group stage. They still have questions, though, and my questions about them are down the spine. Defensively, in tough games, I don't know if they're quite good enough. We'll see how that plays out. Cincinnati punched above their weight. Jaap Stam figured out after game 1 that they couldn't play anything resembling attacking soccer. So they threw all that in the trash, and they got very defensive, and it got them to where it got them. It got them out of the group stage. So you have to give him some credit. I'm not giving him credit for a tactical masterclass or anything like that, because it's not rocket science. It is put everybody behind the ball and defend, and when you get a chance to get out and break, go break. It's individual guys getting out and breaking. It's not an organized counterattack. So I'll give him credit for making the decision and saying, you know what, we're going to try to get some results here and not worry about how it looks. Good. We'll see what happens with them going forward as he actually gets some time with the team. Red Bulls, about what we thought they would be this season. You know, they're a young team. They've still got a lot of work to do. They won a game against Atlanta. They had 1 goal in the tournament. That was it. They scored it 4 minutes in. They didn't score another one. I don't know if they're a playoff team. In a normal year. They might be this year with the expanded playoffs. I don't know if they're a typical playoff team. I don't think they have enough quality. Atlanta, we've talked about it for like a month now. They were bad in this tournament. They've moved on from Frank de Boer. It is a new start when the season restarts on August 22nd, and it's got to be because it looked like it got more stale as the tournament went on. The final game was a huge wake-up call. Second half was better. And you know, guys like Gallagher came on and brought energy. Remedi brought energy. But the first half was the worst 45 minutes Atlanta United's ever played. And the most lifeless 45 minutes Atlanta United's ever played. And that can't happen anymore. Group F, Portland is in the final. Gio Savarese is one of the best managers in the league. They can defend. They can get out and play. They can control possession. They can play any way the game calls for. They're very adaptable, and I think they are the favorites tonight because of that. LAFC, John talked about it. I mean, 11 goals, that's awesome. 7 goals conceded, that's horrible. Knockout games, things don't go their way often, and that's something Bob Bradley's got to correct. Portland can lock things down and win a 1-0 game. I don't know if LAFC can consistently do that, and that's how the playoffs and that's how knockout games get played. Houston, I think, turned some heads early, but then it kind of faded for them. Tab Ramos has got work to do. It's, you know, they've been a bad team for a while. He's not going to turn that around overnight. And he's also got to figure out now, does Mauro Manotas, does Albert Ellis move on? So what happens with the Houston Dynamo after this? He's got to rebuild. You got to give him time and have some patience with him to do that. And LA Galaxy, look, I'm not surprised at all. Their defense is atrocious. They gave up 9 goals. Part of that 11 for LAFC was a huge number against the Galaxy that you have to take with a grain of salt because the Galaxy are awful defending, and they've gotten worse defensively. Part of that's missing Jonathan Dos Santos, who's out due to injury, but it just there's nothing for them defensively, and they can score goals like LAFC and get some more points, but they're never going to win anything if they don't get better defensively. So that's the quick run through. I mean, we mentioned some players that stood out. You know, Brendan Aronson, Chris Mueller, Diego Rossi had a great tournament. There's been a lot of love for Joao Moutinho. I want to see how he does in the final tonight, left back for Orlando. I still question him defensively. I think he fits what they want to do, but I think you can take advantage of him defensively when you pin them back. We'll see if Portland tries to do that at times tonight. It's been a good tournament on the field. I think there were a lot of questions coming in as to what the level of play would look like and would it be good enough for fans, for neutral fans, whatever. I don't think they connected with neutral fans in the way that they wanted to coming into this, but I think the level of play was very good, and games were generally pretty entertaining. So I think it was a win. I think the league did everything it could to get a tournament and get games played and guarantee they'd get played. All the off-the-field stuff with the bubble, you have to give them kudos. And yes, national sports media, the NBA and the NWSL, or the NWSL and MLS influence the NBA, and they should be influencing what everybody else is doing. Even if you're not in a bubble, there's elements to it. Stop saying the NBA created all this. Stop. MLS is right there, and they started first. And both of them are not stupid. They've both talked. They've both figured out ways to make this work, and they're both doing a good job with it. The NWSL did it in a different place and made it work and didn't have any problems. It can be done, and you have to give MLS kudos for that, for getting it done, dealing with the issues with Nashville and Dallas. And they got an event off in a year that a lot of things are getting canceled. MLS has not been completely canceled yet. That's a win. Now, what the rest of the season looks like, we'll get into that after the tournament's done. But right now, MLS has done a very good job so far in dealing with this. We'll see if that can continue.
Nathan Pugh's in this morning, and he says, as we were discussing TV elements and presentation, he says, as a huge rugby fan, the way that they handle TMO, which is VAR, is on mic, and they actually use the stadium's big screen to review. Full transparency to those in the stadium and on TV.
That doesn't always work, though. Wait a minute. Now, I'm not a rugby fan, but I don't think the referees don't have a monitor to look at. They're looking at a big screen that's far away from them. What if it's something you're looking for detail? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Showing it in the stadium, I'm totally with, and some soccer leagues do that. I think the Bundesliga does that with their VAR situations. I'm good with that. Show the replays that are being dialed up. Now that we're starting to get them on the TV broadcast, show them in the stadium. That's fine. I have no problem with that. I don't have a problem. I'm not against having the ref audio live. The referees are against it, and I understand their pushback on it. You've got to get their buy-in to do it. So if that means you've got to do it in some different ways, then you've got to do it in some different ways. You've got to earn their trust. Because if a producer or a director uses that, because let's say a referee blew a call, they just completely blew a call, and the VAR is trying to convince them, hey, you might not have seen it this way, but this is what I saw. No, I saw it. No, I don't think you could see this. You were screened. The VAR is trying to convince them, hey, you missed it, without saying, buddy, you missed it. And you have a little back and forth that doesn't make the center referee look good. Does Pro want that on air? No, they don't. You get the situations that we've talked about, and I think Pro needs to avoid these anyway. You need dedicated VARs. That's something that Pro has to start doing. That's what other leagues have done well. It doesn't need to be a high-level senior referee as a VAR on a game with a rookie referee who's done 5 games. It can't be that. It can't be that, because that can then create these situations where you can hear a senior referee really talking down to a younger referee in a VAR situation, or vice versa. If you have a senior referee and a young referee is the VAR, and the senior referee doesn't want to hear what the VAR is saying because he doesn't respect him. Pro needs to deal with that as well in the assignments, but those are reasons why there's some pushback. It's going to be a process. Every sport has had these issues with replay, with TV, with how much they're going to open themselves up to. It's going to be a process, and people have to be, I think, very protective of their turf. And the TV folks have to understand that and work with them to earn their trust to get more of this. But I'm good with more in the stadium. I mean, I don't know if you want the referee audio in the stadium. I'm going to say no. But showing the replays that they're looking at when it gets triggered to go to the monitor, show it in the stadium. I'm fine with that. And then they've got to do a better job of immediately announcing it. Now, the Premier League, for example, shows the decision with a graphic, they don't make a PA announcement, correct?
Correct. It is on the video boards in the corners, and you see the end decision. You'll see the graphic that it's going to VAR, and then you see the end decision come up on the same video boards.
Yeah, but they don't make an announcement for any more detail.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so at least do that. But I'd like to hear an announcement of the decision. I think that would help. I think that would be a very good step for Pro to take. And that's going to take the AVAR giving the proper language in the decision, because that's a very important element of this when you start talking laws of the game and why decisions are made. Give the proper language to the PA announcer so they announce it properly. Then we all get used to that language. We get used to hearing these things, and it helps everybody understand it more.
Michael Head, he says, MLS is back. The biggest disappointment was no contest, Atlanta United, dropping from one of the faves to out of the elite in question marks. The biggest surprise was purple. And he says, in his opinion, playing attorney on youth fields makes the league look minor. Also, where was all the innovative camera work that was promised?
The camera work was a little lacking. Maybe it was hyped up too much. There were some elements. I mean, the drone stuff was really good at times. There were some cool elements of that. The problem with the fields part of it is they couldn't have done it any other way. Like, they couldn't have played all the games at Exploria Stadium because the field would have been chewed up. They couldn't have played it, I don't think, at Exploria and at Camping World. I still think that would have been too much on the fields. You would have needed, they used 3 fields. Maybe you could have worked a third one in, but then you're going outside the bubble. And that's the hard part of this, is when this came up, people questioned the bubble, period. People questioned the bubble. That's not safe. You definitely can't go outside the bubble, but that's not safe. You can't do the bubble. Now, have we learned more to the point that you could have done that? I think so. I think you could have maintained the bubble. You could have had proper transportation, because go back. That was one of the number one complaints from people about how this was going to work was bus drivers. People were worried about bus drivers. So if you're going to have buses go not just from the hotel to the field, but go from the hotel, an hour, if there's traffic, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever, to these different venues in the Orlando area, people would have went nuts about that at the time. Could it have worked? Yeah, I think it probably could have, but I understand keeping everything in the bubble. I get that. I thought it looked okay. I understand that the issues, and that's not the only person who said that. A bunch of people have said that. I think they did a pretty good job in making it work with what they had to work with. Could it have been better? Yeah. I think if you had been able to do this a little bit later, well, honestly, now I don't know if people would be with it or not, to be perfectly honest. If, let's say, you started the tournament a couple weeks ago, would people have been okay if you went and did the games outside the bubble in Orlando and at Exploria, at Camping World Stadium, at another big venue? I don't know. The look? No, it's not ideal. But I think they did as good of a job as you possibly could. I didn't get a minor sense from it because of the play, but that's also what I was looking for. So if you're looking at it for the visuals, you could see that. I'd like to hear, some non-hardcore soccer people and what they thought about it. I'm also somebody who likes what they're doing with the NBA. And I know a lot of people are saying, no, it needs to be in an arena, it needs to be this. I think they've done a really cool job with it, but basketball is easier to do as a studio sport. So the TV stuff, I mean, the camera stuff, I'm with you. Outside of the drone, I can't really think of anything transformational.
No, and remember also that I know that a lot of folks were looking at that blind spot that the center field, that the one at the 50, and you're missing action there, and
no, you didn't lose anything.
And it's just punching a button, and you're sitting there going, okay, let's go downstairs, and finally there's the action. But I look at the whole element of the tournament, and to be in a bubble, everything would have to be self-contained. And I think to have 3 fields as a part of your bubble to where you can have as much control over your environment as possible. And the further you go away from your environment, like if you did something at Exploria, if you added Camping World to the mix, then I think that you're losing that aspect of control of your own environment. And I think that having these 3 fields at Wide World of Sports and having an eye on all of the players where all they have to do is hop on a little bus or just walk to the stadium. It's you're keeping control of your entire environment, and you're not leaving anything to chance by exiting the bubble, going to another facility, going to other stadiums, and having everything there. I think that what they did the best they could in trying to create an environment that they thought could be as safe and as self-contained as possible. So no, I completely understand.
Glenn Crooks tweeting that Red Bull New York has acquired forward Samuel Tete from FC Salzburg on loan. He was on loan to LASK in Austria. 19 goals and 15 assists in 86 appearances. Chris Armis says Samuel's a very interesting attacking player. He's intelligent, can create on his own, and can stretch back lines with his speed. Coming from Salzburg to New York, that's hasn't happened enough. It needs to happen more for New York to be, I think, just more in the loop with the Red Bull organization. This is a guy who's going from a smaller club to a bigger club. He's going to have some expectations, and they need the attacking help. It's an interesting get, and his speed will be very interesting in that system.
Yeah, and we saw Lask in Europa League in the last round get bumped out by Manchester United. So if that was a team that triggered a memory, that was the most recent memory that we had with Lask.
Ricky Ricardo talking about the bubble and games and locations. Would have been a lot harder to reschedule some games if they left the bubble. Yeah, you would have had less control. I mean, I don't know what those venues would have been doing, but you would have been dealing with their staff because you didn't have control over it. So it would have complicated it. I get it. I think they did the best, and Ricky has a good point. We should be able to view this with the context of a pandemic. MLB playing in their own stadiums, and I view them no differently now because of that. It's a challenge. You didn't have a playbook to go by. MLS was one of the first ones out there to go do this. I think they learned from it and would have potentially done some things differently. I'm with Turner. I think they could have done the final at Exploria. That probably should have been there from day one. When they did this, I'm assuming there was more concern about leaving the bubble, even at this stage. I would like to hear the reasoning for that because the final at Exploria would help a little bit. Christopher Abel, so we were talking replay, we were talking VAR. Christopher says, I personally would love to see soccer implement something other sports allow coaches to be able to challenge calls. I don't know how it would work exactly. You would have to have let me try to workshop this. If I had the mandate to make this happen, you'd have to limit it to
like the one like you have with the one red flag instance.
Well, no, of course that. Like that's every sport has a limitation on how many times a coach can challenge. So that's a no-brainer. I'm talking about what you can challenge.
Oh, okay.
Like I don't want a coach challenging an offside call every time. I don't want them challenging a foul at midfield.
Penalty call?
No, I don't. I'm trying to think. I mean, you'd have to be able to challenge a red card.
Yeah.
You'd have to be able to challenge a goal-scoring situation. You'd be challenging what is already being looked at. So I don't know what changes would be the thing, Chris, as I start thinking about it, because there's not additional things that you want the VAR to look at, I don't think. There's been a lot of talk about the second yellow card and being able to explore that. Then you're opening up the box to reviewing every yellow card. And I don't know if we want to go there. That's going to be a big slowdown to the game. And I don't know if that's a good addition. And I can't really think of anything else to add to what VAR's review. And I wouldn't give the coaches the ability to review anything outside of what's already being reviewed. So I don't know if there's a point to it. Because every goal is being reviewed, period. No questions asked. Every red card situation is being reviewed, whether a red card shown or the VAR thinks a red card should be shown. It's being reviewed. So I don't know what else you would want to do, and I don't want it to be for any foul, because then that, again, slows the game down. I don't know. I don't think there's a point to it. Now, I think if you wanted to do that, you would take it away from VAR. You would basically replace VAR with the coaches requesting a review on one situation a game. But does that make the game better? Does that give you more correct calls than the way it works now with the video assistant referee reviewing situations that should be reviewed? I don't think it does. I think for VAR to get better, you need more training in this country. Although VAR in MLS is better than the Premier League. Yeah, at me. I don't care. It's fine. It is. You actually use the pitch side monitors. You have more of a chance to get things right. It's been good here. There were moments in the tournament where I didn't like it, but there's moments in any game I don't like a referee's call. That's part of the game. A lot of it's so subjective that, yeah, you're going to have disagreements on that. That's fine. I think the thing about VAR in this country is more the mechanics of it that I want to get better. Like I said, I want dedicated video assistant referees. I don't want center referees on a day off from being a center referee or a fourth official going into the VAR booth. I want people who study the craft of being a video assistant referee, because it is a different job. It's not just something you step in the booth and watch a game and do it. Train people to do that job. That's something I want to see more than anything. And I am with the idea at this point. I've been with it early on. I'm still with it, of having that VAR crew in a central location. Get them out of the stadium environment. I think it just saves money, to be honest. I think you can have a better setup for these referees, and they can then set standards for what VAR is. Right now, it feels still a little too haphazard. You need to have a standardized situation of, these are the types of things that VARs are going to intervene on. That's something that needs to get better. So I just don't think giving coaches the ability to challenge something would give you more correct calls. It could, in terms of calls that I don't know if you want everything reviewed. And some people do, some people don't. I don't, because I think it would slow the game down too much. And soccer is a game that you need that rhythm more than any other sport, I think. And the more stoppages that you get, the more problems you have. Which takes you to the hydration break question that I know we've had before. You know, I'm okay with that. That's as far as I would go with extra stoppages. But even that, at times, when it drags on past 90 seconds, it's too much. So you've got to find a way to keep the flow of the game. It's tough. It's an interesting balance. I mean, Chris says you'd give each coach one challenge. If the coach is correct, they keep their challenge. Pretty sure that the NBA automatically reviews plays sometimes as well, but the coaches can still challenge. This is the thing. I wouldn't have a VAR crew and then a separate VAR crew. That's too much. There's no point in doing that. If it's being reviewed, it's already being reviewed. I don't know what the challenge does at that point. If it's actually, I don't know if the NBA has challenges. I have to go back and look. I think they have standardized review like MLS at a certain point in the game. I don't think they do it for the full game. MLS does it for the full game, but it's less moments because of just the way the game's played. I don't know. It's something I'm not completely ruling out, Chris. It's just something that I don't know if it adds. And I think to make it work properly, you'd have to actually take away some of the oversight. And I don't know if that helps either. We'll keep talking about it. We'll keep coming around to it. I want to see dedicated video assistant referees. I think that elevates the replay more than anything else. This is something we have not gotten into yet, but we'll hit it with this. Big issue as we transition over across the pond right now. BBC reporting that Celtic and Aberdeen's matches are called off this week. We've talked about Aberdeen's situation. You had players who went to the local bar, 2 players infected, 6 others were in close contact. They have not tested positive as of yet. Celtic has joined the party. Defender Boli Bolignole Flew to Spain without the club's knowledge. Failed to quarantine, then played on Sunday against Kilmarnock. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, said this was a, quote, flagrant breach of the guidelines. In her daily briefing, told fans that they, quote, should not be expecting to see Aberdeen or Celtic play in the coming week. It's unacceptable. It's completely and utterly unacceptable. And this is how you have to deal with it. When you have the national government coming in, I know Scotland and the UK, the equivalent of the national government. You have government coming in and saying, hey, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. You guys are suspended. If this happens again, we're done. This can't happen anymore. It cannot happen. This is one of the biggest challenges when you talk about college football, because you're talking about players who are not being paid to do their job, which they should be, but they're not. And you're asking them to act like employees when they're not, but maybe they should be. And you are in the situation of 18 to 22-year-olds who are going to do these things. These guys are, some of them are in that age group, but they are professionals. They are being paid to do a job. Part of their job is to follow these protocols. They're not following them. They're putting everybody at risk. They're putting the game at risk. This is the kind of reaction that, man, it would have been nice if this happened with the Marlins or the Cardinals in Major League Baseball, because it is not acceptable to challenge these issues with not following protocols. You are putting people at risk because you wanted to go get milk, according to Derek Jeter, or you wanted to go to the casino, according to reports about the Cardinals, or you wanted to fly to Spain and not follow the quarantine rules in Scotland if you're Celtic defenders, or you wanted to go have a drink downtown Aberdeen and be part of a super spreader event if you're a couple players from Aberdeen. None of that's acceptable. You're putting not just you, not just the people around you, not just your teammates, not just your team staff, not just the other teams and their staff. You're putting your sport at risk. Because if people keep doing that, you're not going to play. It's mind-blowingly stupid. And it's got to stop. And I'm glad she came out and blasted everybody for it and is telling everybody that's coming from the top, yeah, they're not going to play this week. Good. It's got to get fixed. It's the only way you're going to deal with this stuff.
Sturgeon says, by putting this as clearly as I can in language that the football world will understand, consider today the yellow card. The next time it will be the red card because you will leave us absolutely no choice. Every day I stand here and ask members of the public to make huge sacrifices in how they live their lives, and the vast majority of members of the public are doing that, and it's not easy. We can't have privileged football players just deciding they're not going to bother. This can't go on, end quote.
Yeah, the privileged footballers parts may be a little unnecessary, but yeah, if you're asking the public to make sacrifices to be smart and do the things they need to do, and I mean, that's what we should be at here with that kind of conversation, and then you have people who are getting some exceptions, especially when you're talking about travel and Scotland and how all that's working. You're getting exceptions to be able to do things. People, allowances are being made for you to be able to do your job, and you're, not taking that seriously. Yeah, it's not okay. So I very much want to see how MLS handles this stuff with teams going back into markets, because you're going to have these situations. We have seen it in situations in Major League Baseball. And, I mean, thank you, Ricky Ricardo, for posting this. This shows you how this stuff is unacceptable. So, quickly, Zach Plesac of the Cleveland Indians went out and apologized for going out, right? Basically, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Did he test positive? I don't believe so at this point.
I don't think so. I haven't seen that.
But he went out. He got caught going out. He apologized for going out. Then, according to John Heyman on Twitter, here Indians starter Mike Clevenger sat through a team meeting yesterday and defended Zach Plesac, knowing he'd been out with Plesac, then flew back with the team. Now, the Indians discover that Clevenger was out with Plesac, and so they've appropriately quarantined Clevenger. This whole thing about And it's going on in college football, and it's going to happen with every sport right now. This whole thing about the arguments of, you don't need sports. We have to have sports. Well, you have to let them play. They want to play. Let them play. Well, we have to have plans. We have to have protocols. We have to have procedures. There are ways to do this. We've seen it worldwide. We've seen it in countries that, yes, have the coronavirus under control better. That's absolutely true. But we have seen leagues finish their seasons. We've seen them travel. We've seen them play in venues. We've seen these things happen. Just because you're traveling further in the United States for a baseball game doesn't change anything, really, if you're following the protocols. You have to follow the protocols to make any of this work. And the conversation has to move at this point from they can't play football, they can't play baseball, they can't play soccer, to can they do it safely? Do they have a plan to do it safely? And then, are the people involved in carrying out said plan able to follow said plan? These are the conversation points. And it's very frustrating to see everybody start to decamp into their positions. And sadly, so many are related to political lines, which have nothing to do with a virus. But anyway, and get into this conversation of, yes, no, can't do it. Yes, you can do it. But if you're going to do it, you don't have to have all these restrictions. And no, stop. Stop. If you're going to do it, you got to be smart about it right now. And if you can't be smart about it, you can't do it. That's the conversation. Can college football have a season safely? Well, from what we've seen with the lack of planning with students coming back to campus, what we've seen with the poor protocols in terms of working out, not even getting down to practices, working out where people aren't following protocols, and you're getting 10, 20, 30 people testing positive, well, I don't know if college football can do it safely because they don't seem to want to. Major League Baseball, for the most part, is trying to do it safely, and you have the number of teams who are doing it safely, and you have some people who are being stupid. And they need to be, look, I know competitive balance, I'm a stickler for making balanced schedules and trying to make it as fair as possible. The Cardinals can't get their stuff together. Boot them. Boot them and redo the schedule. Stop with the nonsense. If teams have multiple breaches of protocol, bye. You're out. You're out of the season. Deal with it. You've got to do those things to get this done. It's just crazy how the conversation is not even about the issues anymore. Nobody's talking about, well, okay, what does college football have to do? What can they do some kind of a bubble? Can they have the students who are playing sports be in a dorm together? Can they do virtual classes? Can they do all these things to limit contact? Is that possible? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But try to figure it out. Instead of just this, no, we're just going to do it how we're going to do it. Well, the way you're doing it's not working. It's just the whole thing is ridiculous at this point. I'm glad to see in Scotland that you have two teams that have had breaches and are being punished severely and being threatened by the government of, you keep doing this, not just you, but you're getting the whole league stopped. So have fun dealing with that with the SPFL.
Yeah, but to see that come from Nicola Sturgeon, it needed to be done. Glad she did it. She and the health minister said their piece on the matter, and you hope that it sticks. And that this is that yellow card. Nicola Sturgeon says this is a yellow. I don't want it to be a red. So for the head of your government to come out and sit there and call out two of your teams for how they didn't handle protocols, I would tip my hat, but it's good stuff. Sorry that it had to come to that point. You have to say things like this, and good on her that she said it.
You got Tuesday thoughts, send them to us on Twitter, @SoccerDownHere. I know we've got a few there. You can send them into the Twitch stream as well, in the clubhouse, the locker room, whatever you want to call it. We still haven't come up with a name yet. That'll happen eventually. Throw those into the chat, and you can also send us an email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. John, tell us about Steve Apolinski.
Apolinski and Associates, LLC, proud supporters of Soccer Down Here and everything on the SDH network. Wrongful death and serious injury attorneys, over 30 years of experience, over $40 million of judgments for their clients in Georgia and Alabama. If this is an unfortunate road that you have to go down, a couple different ways that you can catch up with Steve and Apolinski and Associates. Go to the website, aa-legal.com. You hit the enter button, pop-up window shows up low right-hand corner. You can have an instant conversation with somebody, 24/7, 365, 366, whenever you want to have a conversation. Doesn't matter time of day. Click on the website, aa-legal.com. You can also shoot Steve an email individually at Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. Or you can give him a buzz, get a free consultation on your matter, 404-377-9191. Recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine, listed as one of the top 100 firms in this here state of Georgia for everything they do for their clients, wrongful death and serious injury matters. The website for Apolinski and Associates, LLC, is aa-legal.com.
All right. Let's get caught up on some of the news around the world before we jump back into Tuesday Thoughts. Germany, there had been talk that they were going to try to get fans in the building to start the new season. That's not going to happen. Monday, a ban was extended for spectators in stadiums until the end of October at least. The German Football League had hoped that there would be an updated proposal, it'd be accepted, certain conditions would be allowed, et cetera, et cetera. Health ministers of Germany's federal and 16 state governments rejected that proposal. They pointed to rising numbers of coronavirus infections, and that's coming from the health ministry of the state of Berlin. Quote, in particular, local health authorities are currently focused on contact tracing, the school start, and the return of holiday travelers. Major events in Germany are banned until the end of October. Soccer's no exception. So the ministers agreed that they're not going to make an exception for soccer matches, and they're not going to revisit this. So no fans in Germany through the end of October. I would assume that there will be no fans in any league in Europe, any major league anyway, through the end of October. There's some who have already started this process, mostly smaller leagues, mostly ones that are a little more cavalier about everything. So that's where we're at with Germany with fans. Now, Germany with financial situations. Bild reported last night, and our friend Derek Ray had this on Twitter, Schalke might have to sell Weston McKennie quickly. It's pretty good to be able to quickly flip a player for $20 to $25 million, but they might have to make a move quickly and sell him to Hertha Berlin. Now, McKennie has talked about the Premier League. There's been rumors of Premier League interest. Schalke might not be able to wait to see what happens. They have to get a deal done and get it done now because go back to what we talked about at the end of the season. Schalke came out and said, look, we can't expect to get into Europe at all right now. That dream is done. And they're capping their maximum salaries, and they are trying to get their finances in order with this new world. They got to bring in money. They can't wait for a bidding war to possibly emerge in England and get stuck. If they can get 20 to 25 million from Hertha Berlin, they're going to take it today. So that, we've talked about the effects of this. That's an effect. That's only going to continue to increase with more situations like that. These types of deals, these 20 to 30 kind of £1 million, €1 million, $1 million deals seem to be a little popular at the moment. I feel like the big deals, really the only mega deal that's on the table is the Sancho move, and it might not happen now. That next tier of like those 40 to 80, those are the ones that I think aren't happening. Those are the ones that I think you lose out. These, 20 to 30s, they seem to be picking up a little bit. Lille in France has reached an agreement with Ghent in Belgium on the signing of Canadian international Jonathan David. Medical is supposed to take place this morning, and the fee is expected to be €27 million. It's a big signing. That also affects Timothy Weah, who is at Lille, who is trying to get playing time, and you've added another piece now, another CONCACAF piece to maybe make that more complicated. We've got to get into the NWSL as well. We've got a few different things on the women's side. We're going to clean up what's going on Twitter, clean up some Tuesday Thoughts on Twitch before we jump into that, and we'll finish with some things to look for in Portland and Orlando tonight. So what do we have on Twitter?
On Twitter, Daniel Price has a prediction for tonight with MLS is back. And his prediction is it can go either way.
Okay.
He says if Nani has a good night, 3-2 Orlando. If he doesn't, it's likely 3-1 Minnesota. And then getting back to our discussion with challenges. Daniel says that he would go with one free challenge a match, all failed challenges after the fact, lose a sub.
But I need to know what you're challenging. That's the question. If you're going to add coaches' challenges, what are they challenging that's not already being reviewed? Because if they're challenging something that's being reviewed, it's a wasted process because it's already being reviewed. I don't think their challenge would change that. So I need to know what they would be challenging. That's the part I don't really – that's why I don't know if it makes any sense to do that in this. But we'll keep figuring it out. We're trying to solve all the soccer problems of the world. We'll do our best.
And that's it on Twitter. But the one thing that I wanted to add when you were discussing a centralized VAR element for Major League Soccer, I think what that also does, in addition to save cost, is it takes all of the background noise and all of the noise of the building away from you, and it puts you in an environment where you can analyze it without hearing fans yelling, fans screaming one way or the other. The emotion is removed from the situation that you would be in if you're an on-site VAR. So that just adds that element to me.
I'm glancing really fast, so if you have more of a knowledge on the NBA replay system, please let me know. It looks like the coaches do not have challenges there, and it is triggered by replay center officials. It doesn't look like it's triggered by coaches' challenges. I think the NBA system is something you can look at and try to maybe learn from, maybe learn what not to do, but the system is a little closer to what the VAR setup is. So maybe there can be some crossover knowledge sharing there. All right. So things on Twitch to wrap up before we get into the NWSL and women's national team conversations, because it's an interesting one to dig into. Lots of conversation about what they want to call the name. We've got Clubhouse, we've got Locker Room, we've got Locker Room Talk from Katie Weaver, which could get out of hand. Be careful with that one. So we've got lots of different possibilities there. Lots of good conversation as usual. If you guys who listen to the show on a regular basis, even if you're not able to join us on a live basis, you can watch on Twitch. You can go back and watch the show on Twitch. But if you can join us live, the chat room has turned into a pretty cool thing, to be honest. Like, I love that it's created a bit of a community for people who listen to the show. And, sometimes it turns into laughing at stupid things we say. Sometimes it turns into its own conversations. Sometimes it really becomes a cool back and forth during the live show. It's all over the place. But I'm cool that I'm happy it's become like a community for these things. And at a time where, it's hard to have a normal community, if we can create a virtual one here around the show, it's pretty exciting. So I'm glad we're able to do that. Okay. Folks on Twitch, if you guys have questions, go ahead and keep throwing them in, and we'll get to them. But let's get into this women's conversation. I mentioned it yesterday. The article in Our Game magazine from Richard Laverty posted. Now, Richard said in his tweet teasing it yesterday that he was going to dig into how complicated some of the moves are from NWSL players overseas. The Sam Mewis move was announced yesterday. It was a transfer. It was not a loan. Sources are telling Our Game magazine that the NWSL is looking at another tournament before the end of the year. But it looks like that's going to be more of a series of friendlies, not a tournament idea, and probably split into two with an East and a West. Is that enough? Potentially beginning the end of September, beginning of October. Is that enough to keep people interested? Is that enough to keep people engaged? Is that enough to keep players engaged? I don't know. Players who are looking for moves abroad and don't want to risk not playing competitively until 2021, you've got issues. You've got budgets in Europe affected, which there might not be money for these moves. You've got players who are contracted to the U.S. Soccer Federation and allocated to their NWSL clubs. For example, the Sam Mewis negotiations probably went through U.S. Soccer. Rose Lavelle, same thing. And Laverty says, contrary to any rumors that the U.S. Soccer Federation is trying to stop Lavelle from going abroad, source familiar with the situation said the Federation will not stop Lavelle or any other player from going abroad, and any delay in the deal would not be down to the Federation side. Now, that's complicated, because this is what Laverty brings out, and this is something I didn't know in detail. Right now, there are no current restrictions on the number of contracted U.S. women's national team players who can play abroad in 2020. That number is limited to 3 in 2021, as laid out in the collective bargaining agreement between the U.S. Women's National Team Players Association and U.S. Soccer. Per that CBA, a minimum of 16 players will be on contract with U.S. Soccer in 2021. There's some talk that they're bringing the number of players contracted with U.S. Soccer down. I would assume, with the financial situation you're in right now, they'll probably be at 16. But only 3 of the players that are contracted with U.S. Soccer can play abroad. That's it. That starts in 21. Right now, Sam Mewis is not contracted with U.S. Soccer because of the transfer. Now, this is the question I have. At least that's my interpretation. I could be wrong in that. Is that true? Because if it is, then you can transfer players out. But that makes it tricky in loan situations. Because if they're still going to be under contract to U.S. Soccer, okay. Now, the question that I'm asking about Mewis, and this is something the NWSL media needs to dig into because I don't know. Mewis was signed by U.S. Soccer, allocated to North Carolina Courage, transferred to Manchester City. Who did Manchester City pay the transfer fee to? Did they pay it to North Carolina Courage because she's contracted at the club level to North Carolina Courage, just allocated there by U.S. Soccer? Did they pay it to U.S. Soccer because she's under a contract? I don't know. In the past, and this was pre-MLS, so this is when men's players didn't have clubs to play at or didn't have contracts with clubs to make a living, the Federation in the lead-up to 94 basically created a club that was the national team. They signed players, and they transferred players. They transferred players out to clubs, and they received transfer fees. In this Mewis deal, who got the transfer fee? Because the question for me is, does she count as one of the 3 players signed to a U.S. Soccer contract that is playing overseas? Or does she not count because she was transferred? That's the question I have, and I don't really know how that works. The basic stuff with going to play in England, work permits are always an issue. You have to play in 75% of your national team's games. That's going to be an issue for some players on the fringes. Players like Adriana Franch, Christy Mewis, Danielle Colaprico, those were mentioned by name. I don't know if there was interest in bringing them over. They're not going to get a work permit unless they've got a passport. And now that might get even trickier with Brexit because they might have a European passport that would have helped them before. They might not have a UK passport. That might not help them now. That's another question as things go. Now, players like Jess Fishlock and Rachel Daly have options and could go. Daly has options in the Women's Super League and in leagues around Europe. Hasn't made a decision yet. Her tournament with Houston probably is going to help her have more options. Fishlock is set to play in the Women's Super League on a short-term deal with Reading. Now, loans, NWSL is going to want those loans to end December 31st for contracts that end this year. For contracts that are multiple year, they're going to be okay with it going to February 28th because that's when you're going to want to get them back for preseason training. So, now this is an interesting part. As to whether players who head abroad on loan would forego part of their wages, the NWSL issued the following statement. We established an agreement with the NWSLPA prior to the tournament that no matter what, whether players participated in the Challenge Cup or not, their contracts would be paid in full through the year. We do not share details on how loan agreements are broken down between the clubs. It is therefore between the clubs to come to a financial agreement about how much each side pays for non-allocated, that's the non-national team players, for their players' wages while on loan. This could be a situation where, again, financial considerations do come into play. NWSL teams are going to pay their players to the end of the year. That is already agreed upon. There's no way out of that. The way out of that is to loan players to another club, and they pay the wages for the rest of the year, because that's how some loans work. Loans, a lot of times, if it's a big club to a small club, the big club might keep paying the wages for the player or pay 70% or pay 80%, et cetera, et cetera. For a loan from a small club to a big club, the big club might just say, you know what, we'll pay the salary for you. We got it covered. That might be in lieu of a loan fee to loan the player, which is also typical. We talked about that with Jan Hurtado going from Boca Juniors to Red Bull Bragantino in Brazil, where the loan fee is $150,000, and there's a potential transfer fee on the other side, but the Red Bull club is paying Boca $150,000 for the loan. I don't know how the salary's working out. In this case, NWSL teams might look to loan some players where they can play in different leagues if those clubs are going to be willing to pick up some of the bill, because it could help NWSL clubs save some money the rest of the year. One more issue with NWSL to keep in mind, with a lot of college programs looking at spring seasons. January college draft? Does that make any sense? Probably not. Players who are going into college, are they going to opt not to go to college or skip a year maybe? Are players who are going into their final year of college going to say, well, I don't want to stick around for a spring season. I'm going to leave, and I'll go ahead and go into the draft. I don't know how that works. You've got so many international players now in college. Are they just going to go back to play professionally in their countries and chase contracts? It's a really interesting time in the NWSL. I highly recommend this article, and Richard does great work covering the breadth of the women's game from an international perspective. It's really complicated. The whole situation with the women's national team, contracts, and U.S. soccer, and how many can be abroad, that's the number one thing for me that jumps out, and I want to see how it gets handled.
Yeah, I went through the Laverty article this morning, and you bring up the biggest questions that I had. Who got the transfer fee? To me, that's the biggest element of this, and then the questions going forward about salary relief for the NWSL because of what's not happening with the league this year, and all of the machinations with all of that. But yeah, the biggest thing for me was because of the layout of national team players and where they fit and allocation and being loaned out and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, the biggest thing for me was who gets the transfer fee and all this. That was the number one thing that came across.
Yeah, let me know what you think on the NWSL. I've always been to this point with, following the NWSL, wanting to follow it more closely. We need more information, contracts, caps, all that kind of stuff. We need that in MLS as well. The NWSL is no different there. But we need to know what those relationships are. We need to know how that setup is, because it was a frustrating element during the Challenge Cup where players were on minutes restrictions because of the federation, not because of the club. That makes you question who's in charge. And that's something that's not a good fit if you're trying to sell me on the clubs and the games. That's something they have to balance better. I've never been a big fan of this idea about the player pool. I do understand the contract situations because the federation is in a position to pay more than the clubs are, but does it need to be converted to more in terms of per game, per camp, those kinds of things, as opposed to a salary every year? Because it broadens the pool if you don't have to call in a certain number of contracted players. If you are limited by contracted players, you better get your contracts right year after year, and you better commit to the right players, because when you start carrying players on salaries and then have to bring them into your national team when they're out of form, when they're not playing well, that's not good for anybody. Nobody wins during that. They need to all get on the same page about this. Now feels like the time to do it. Yeah. We'll see if they do. Cindy Parlow at the Federation has a lot on her plate right now, but she understands this situation maybe better than anybody, having played in the old WUSA and played with the national team and finding that balance between the two. A couple updates on national team management situations in the women's game. The Daily Mail dropped this one out there that was a bit of a surprise. The Australia national team job is open, and there's a short list of 3, according to the Daily Mail. Joe Montemurro, who is the current manager of Arsenal, is on the list. Okay. Jill Ellis is on the list. Okay, makes sense. Phil Neville's on the list, which is a bit of a surprise. You're making faces. Why?
No, it's like you're adding the names and the 3, and then I was waiting for that third one, Neville. Yeah.
You're making faces. Why are you making faces about Phil Neville?
No, it wasn't making faces about Phil Neville.
Okay.
It's like all of the discussions that we've been having, it's like, all right, so Neville's stepping away from the Lionesses, and now we're seeing his name being put in with the Matildas. So it was just, like I said, I was reacting to the article in and of itself that the third name, oh, by the way, is the guy who was tired of one, and now he's being linked to the other, whether, once again, it's the Daily Mail.
Well, you say he's tired of one. I think he might have been forced to be tired of one because his performances after the World Cup with England were bad. I don't think that was Phil Neville says, I don't want to do this anymore. Oh, we're caught by surprise.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. Now, I think any surprise is that Phil Neville has said he wants to get back into the men's game, and he talked about stepping stones, and that rubbed people the wrong way. Would he want to take this opportunity? It's a very talented team, and it's a very, I think, up-and-coming team. And you would be taking them over with the goal of managing them in the 2023 World Cup that's on Australian soil. It's a pretty attractive job. So that could be a really good fit for Phil Neville, or Jill Ellis, or Joe Montemurro. Jill Ellis is an interesting one because the Times reported this morning that the FA in England, where Jill Ellis was seen as the number 1 contender for the job, Times is reporting that ain't the case anymore because her salary demands are too much. They are looking at Dutch manager Serena Wiegman instead. Now, Wiegman got the Dutch to the World Cup final for the first time ever. She has re-upped her contract with the Netherlands FA through 2021, and they don't think they could get her out of it again down to the financial considerations. The Dutch would be in the Olympics in 21 as well. They don't think they could get her until then. So now they've got to figure out, okay, do you have a caretaker while she finishes out her contract? Do you have Phil Neville stay on? Does he want to stay on? If the Australia job becomes a possibility, maybe he doesn't stay on. How do you handle that? But the news, because a lot of people were expecting, oh, Jill Ellis is going to take that. It's done. They're going to give her what she wants. Her contract demands are too high, so that might not happen. The Times is reporting they're going in another direction.
According to Jonathan Tannenwald, apparently Jill Ellis just asked for just over $900,000 a year in salary.
She was making what here? Do you have any idea?
Efforting.
Okay, this will take like 20 minutes. She wasn't making that, I don't think. I want to say it was in the 500 range, but I might be wrong. That might have been her first contract.
Just under $400,000, according to news in February.
Okay, well.
Base salary of $389,409.
Yeah, that's looking for a big raise. That doesn't feel realistic in the current climate. It doesn't feel realistic from the FA, who is laying people off. But if you think you can get it, you go get it. So maybe she can't get it. But Australia could be a really good fallback, but they don't really have a great financial situation either, as we've talked about for months about this whole Foxtel idea where Foxtel's trying to get out of their TV deal, which really boosts the Australian FA on the men's and women's side. The women's game in Australia, there's a lot of concern about the W League continuing because of the financial effects of coronavirus. So I don't know if the money's going to be any better in Australia. There's always been this idea that, well, they're going to host the World Cup, so there's going to be money coming in. Well, there's a pandemic that's going to affect money coming in, so I don't know if that's going to happen. I think Ellis might have priced herself out of the best opportunities.
Yeah, if you're looking for basically, a 225% raise from one gig to the next.
Well, I think,
and in this environment too, if that is in fact the number.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing to me is I think it's a different conversation normally because she just won back-to-back World Cups. Yeah. If you're not in a coronavirus situation, we're having a very different conversation, but we are in a pandemic, and I just don't think that request is reasonable. I don't think you're going to be able to find that at all. So I don't know. I think she's priced herself out of a couple of jobs. Update on the coaching search in Ecuador on the men's side, because it dovetails with a question that Katie Weaver had in the Twitch chat. Gustavo Alfaro has been linked to the Atlanta United job. I don't think directly. We talked about it a little bit last night. I think what has happened here is South American media has heard the list that MLS Soccer had and heard people talk about, well, this person's a good fit, this person's a good fit in the U.S., and has then said that this person is under consideration. I don't know if Gustavo Alfaro is under consideration. Katie asked if he's a good fit. I don't think he is, personally, because he's generally come from smaller teams. His last job was at Boca Juniors. He quit after they lost in the Copa Libertadores semifinals to River, where he took a team that was a very good attacking team in Boca and made them pretty conservative in that moment. Coming from smaller teams who he always had to really fight and scratch to get them to climb up the table, he's fairly pragmatic. He's going to be more defensive. I don't think he's the type of person that is being talked about here. And this is also backed up by Javier Davila, who is a reporter in Ecuador covering the national team search. And he said in the federation, this is translated, they don't know exactly what they want because the list of names of people they're considering is all over the place. He says it's extensive, from offensive people like Matias Almeida, who has been linked to this job, to defensive like Gustavo Alfaro. He's a totally different style, so you have to look for a profile. Also on the list, Guillermo Barros Escaloto, among others, but 2 MLS managers on the list for Ecuador, and one who is linked maybe loosely to an MLS job in Gustavo Alfaro. And, I mean, they're all completely different. Like, Scalotto, I think, is a pretty malleable manager. Like, he'll be attacking when he's got attacking players. I think he doesn't have a problem being a little more conservative. The LA Galaxy can't be conservative right now because their defense is terrible. Almeida, we know what he wants to do. We know it's wide open, run and gun. It's wild. It can be reckless. And I think we know enough about Alfaro that it is going to be more conservative as a base. So that's why I'm not the biggest fan of Alfaro as a fit. If he can come in and say, hey, now I've learned from what happened at Boca. That was my first big appointment. And Alfaro's an experienced manager. He's been around the block. But if he comes in and sells it differently, that I've had this experience now, I know what worked, I know what didn't work, I'd approach this differently, he can sell you on the plan because he's had success. But he didn't win the title at Boca. He left. And I'll have to go back and dig into that timeline. It was a very emotional loss to River in the semifinals of that. Because remember, this was a year after losing in the final. And that was an emotional loss. You lose in the semis the next year to your hated rival. It's even more emotional. If I remember correctly, he offered his resignation in the next couple of days. And there was some back and forth about when it would happen, and he ended up leaving at the end of the calendar year. They take that summer break at the end of the calendar year in Argentina, and they turn to a former manager in Russo who went on a great run, and Boca ended up winning the title. But they were not in a title-winning position when Alfaro left. So Alfaro is under consideration for Ecuador. He's been loosely linked here. I'm a little skeptical of how linked he is here. He's going to have to sell the club on, hey, I'm approaching things differently. What you saw at Boca, and especially what you saw in the Libertadores semis, I'm not going to be that manager going forward. He's got to sell that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to track down the resignation and all that kind of stuff that went on.
You're not. Don't worry about it. It was in the Spanish language media. It's not that big of a deal. You're not going to find it, John. It doesn't matter. It's not important.
Okay.
Don't get bogged down with unimportant things.
Okay. There you go.
What else is on your list today?
What's on my list today?
You have a list.
The game tonight.
All right. What are your questions about the game tonight?
Well, I mean, obviously, we need predictions from folks to be put in the timeline, especially in the locker room or the whatever we're going to call it. I mean, I think for me, the matchup to look at is really, I mean, because let's just, from past experience, I'm looking at Orlando up top. In matchups, we've seen Nani on the left, Tesho in the middle, Mueller on the right. For me, it's probably Orlando's right side up against the left side of the defense for Portland, because we know what Mueller can do, and we've seen Juan come up and be a part of their offensive pushes. Is that how does Portland handle things on the left-hand side with that right-sided activity from Orlando? At least that, to me, is going to be one of the matchups I'm going to be looking at early.
Turner Kirby asks, what are your thoughts on the trophy design now that we've actually seen what the trophy looks like?
Where was that trophy design? I mean, for me, it was like, okay, so it's a trophy. I'm not going to sit here and go, oh my God, it's the best looking thing ever. I mean, it's a trophy. It looks like it's got some South American trophy leanings to it. I'm fine. It looks fine to me.
Well, Lottie frickin' da!
It's a trophy, John says.
Yeah, it's a trophy.
Okay.
I see. Like I said, I see the South American leanings. I mean, it's not something that you're
South
asking
American
me
leanings?
about.
South American leanings? What are you talking about?
It just you have the golden soccer ball as a part of the integration at the base and things like that. So no, it's not something. I'm not looking at it like it's the Holy Grail, and if it doesn't look like the Holy Grail,
slow down. It's just a question. What do you think about the trophy?
It's all right.
It's all right.
It's okay.
It's fine. I think they can drink a lot of beer out of it. That's the thing that probably has the biggest factor.
It's got a big chalice, and that's what you need in a situation like that.
I honestly think it looks pretty cheap. I don't like it. I don't like glass trophies like that, though. I don't like the trophies that have that kind of look. I didn't like it for the NWSL. I don't like it for this one. So, Turner, it gets a thumbs down for me. I am not a fan. It was better than the Challenge Cup, but not much. I am not a fan.
Thumb sideways for me because you're asking me about a trophy.
Katie with a question about Alfaro before we get back into the game. Would he agree to coach Pitti or vice versa? That stuff gets so overplayed. I know you're kidding, Katie, but I see people get into this oh, well, you couldn't have brought Guillermo Barros Escaloto here because he wouldn't coach Pitti Martinez. He's a River Plate guy. It's not like that. It's a rivalry, but man, these people are professionals. People are really thinking these things are true. And it's whoa. There are situations if you could get Marcelo Gallardo, yeah, it's great because he has a relationship with Pitti Martinez. But Boca and River guys do coexist. There's a lot more crossing of the streams between Boca and River than people maybe get credit for. So I know Katie's joking, but man, I've seen people run with that. Oh, you can't go get a Boca player. They would fight each other. No, they wouldn't. It's not like that. Come on now. There's plenty of rivalries that, I guess we can't ever get a player who played for Orlando. They can't do that. No. They're going to fight each other. You can't have that.
Red Bull players.
Yeah, no, that's bad. It's very bad. Come on. It's silliness.
At least with the MLS's back trophy, I don't think you can have a Colin Morikawa moment.
What? What?
You put the MLS's back trophy, you can't have a moment like we had at the golf major this past weekend where it snaps in half the second you lift it up, that it's got more than one piece to it. It looks like it's a one-piece trophy.
You're testing it. You're testing that. It can definitely break because everything can break. Katie is re-entering the MLS's back big gulp trophy to the discussion. It does look like a big gulp, and there's going to be a lot of alcoholic beverages in it for whoever wins it.
Yes.
That's for sure. Actually, Ricky Ricardo says there will be an Atlanta player who plays for Orlando or vice versa. Breck Shea. And people had issues with Breck Shea because he was an Orlando player before he went to Vancouver. Breck Shea did a good job here before he had a knee injury. Merrim, I think Orlando not liking Justin Merrim made him more accepted here
Yeah.
So I think that factored in to help Justin Merrim with an acceptance from Atlanta fans because of that. Mikey Ambrose, another good one from Chris Ashley, although I don't know if Orlando people even remember Mikey Ambrose. Sadly, I think Mikey can start in this league. He just doesn't have the opportunity to. I'd like to see him in an extended run with somebody.
Yeah.
Paul McDonough in the front office, good point. But again, there was friction with Orlando, so maybe that helped. And it was at the very beginning before the rivalry really got going. Sean Vergara is threatening me if I pick Orlando tonight. Sean, you don't have to threaten me. I am not picking Orlando tonight. You should know if you've listened to the show how much I like Portland and how much I like Giovanni Savarese. Portland has been a team that I have been so in on for years, honestly, since Gio went there. Yeah. Last year I was really disappointed with them. They didn't play up to expectations. I wasn't surprised they got to the final in 18. They have a very good team, and I think they have a more versatile team, and I think they'll win tonight. But how they win and what they have to deal with is the question. I think this game comes down to who's going to end up being the MVP of this tournament, Nani and Sebastian Blanco. Blanco has 3 goals and 5 assists in the tournament. Nani in the 6 games in 2020 this year, 3 goals and 4 assists. Both have been outstanding. Both are those guys who can put the team on their back in special moments. Both are capable of the spectacular. If they both have great games, we're in for a treat tonight. If one does and one doesn't, that team's probably going to win.
Yeah.
Orlando, looking at the way that they're going to approach this. Their backline's much improved. Goalkeeper, much improved. They have the better goalkeeper of the two. Pedro Gallese has been very, very good in this tournament. Center backs, Robin Janssen has been a beast since he arrived. Antonio Carlos has been good. I'm still kind of getting to know him a little bit and be watching him closely tonight. They're giving up less than a goal a game in the tournament. They're good defensively. Kefsey with another good point. Harrison Heath was another Orlando-Atlanta guy. Orlando on the right side, and John mentioned it with Chris Mueller and Juan, they create some overloads there. That can also create opportunities. Now, Matt Doyle has a really good tactical preview over at MLSsoccer.com. I recommend checking that out. I agree with a good bit of it. I definitely agree with the conversation about this. So, Juan bombing forward, Mueller, we know what he's been in this tournament, although he's tailed off a little bit towards the end of the event. You don't want to put Sebastian Blanco as the left winger who's going to have to help defensively. You don't want him to burn his energy defensively. So does that mean that you do not start Diego Valeri? Valeri's been in and out. You're managing his minutes at this point. You're being careful with him for the long haul. Do you have him come off the bench in a final, which sounds crazy, but you can't have Blanco running himself into the ground chasing Juan. I think you have to start, like an Andy Polo over on that side, who is going to be able to run. You basically come into the game and you say to Andy Polo, you do not let Juan get by you, period. You run until you can't run, and at the 50 to 60 minute mark, we're going to bring on Diego Valeri, and then you can shift the way the team plays a little bit. But you can't let Blanco run himself into the ground early chasing. You've got to create a structure to deal with that. And that's something Doyle pointed out that I completely and utterly agree on. The Timbers do have more rest for the first time in a while. They had come in to their last 2 games on 3 days rest where the opponent had 5 days rest. And they grinded out results. Now they get an extra day of rest over Orlando. That's going to help them a ton. They're going to be fresher. Does that help them late in the game if they need something late, potentially? I think where Portland can win this game is in the midfield. Eric Williamson finally getting an opportunity for them. He's a good partner for Diego Chara. I think they get the best out of one another. That in front of their back line, it's had to be good, and it's going to have to be good tonight because the center back pairing, honestly, the whole back line for Portland, questionable. They don't have a clean sheet in the tournament. Steve Clark has had some moments that will shock you. Center backs, it's been Mabiala, it's been Suparch. Outside backs, it's been everybody. Who's going to be at right back tonight is another big question for Portland on the lineup sheet because, talked about the left side, the right side, You don't have as much of Joao Moutinho going forward, but you have Nani that will drift in and drift around, and you've got to deal with him. Do you go with the 20-year-old Pablo Bonilla, or do you go with the veteran in Chris Duval? I think you lean Duval. And I think also there's going to have to be an understanding between Chara and Williamson that one of them is going to have to cheat to that side a little bit to help when Nani starts to get loose. Because when he cuts in, somebody's got to step there and cut that off. It's got to come from the central midfield. You don't want a center back stepping out there and then opening up space for Tesho Akindele, for Chris Mueller making a run, for Mauricio Pereira, who is another kind of under-the-radar player for Orlando. That's worked out really good for Orlando because we're all talking about Nani. We're all talking about Mueller. We're talking about Huan. Up top, Dom Dwyer's out. Tesho Akindele. Okay, you don't have crazy expectations for Akindele. I'm not really talking about Pereira. And Pereira is a really good number 10 for them. If Portland gets preoccupied with the overload on their left side, coming from Orlando's right, if they get preoccupied with Nani and they start to get pulled apart, that's going to open up space for Pereira to deal with. I think Diego Chara is going to have to shut down Mauricio Pereira. I think Williamson is going to have to help deal with Nani. I think that means you've got your central midfielders, your holding midfielders tied up, dealing with things. You've got your outside backs tied up, dealing with things. So your attack is going to be 4, sometimes 3, maybe sometimes 2, going forward and having to create on their own. Sebastian Blanco can do that. Diego Valeri can do that. Jeremy Abobasi has been really good in this tournament. They're going to have to do it on their own for the most part. It's not going to be like Orlando where you're getting those outside backs forward, you're getting a bunch of overloads, a bunch of 2v1s, 3v2s. Portland's going to have to be conservative to deal with that. But when it's on to go forward, Blanco can light it up. Valeri can light it up when he comes on. I want to see where they find the attack from, or if it's just down to moments of brilliance. And it might be, at least early. If I'm Giovanni Savarese early on, I'm telling my outside backs, don't go anywhere, stay home. I'm telling those central midfielders, like we said, Chara, Pereira, can't let him get free. Williamson, you got to help over here with Nani. Left wing, if it's Polo, if it's somebody else, okay, you've got to come back and help defensively. So you're going to try to create 2v2 on that side when Huan goes. You're going to try to create 2v1 to shut Nani down. You're 1v1 with Chara against Pereira. You like your odds there. You got your 2 center backs. All right. You've accounted for Orlando. Now where can you hurt them? Blanco drifting, if he's your number 10 to start as opposed to your left winger, Blanco drifting into that space where Huan would be. Abobasi drifting there and pulling people with him, and then Blanco comes through the middle. Things like that you've got to look for. I think Valeri starts on the bench. I think Portland is fairly conservative early on, looks to play on the counter. And as they kind of wear Orlando down a little bit, because I think that's something Portland's been really good at, you get them tired, you bring on Valeri, and you strike. And I think that's where they're going to go tonight.
I have it 2-1 Portland, and it's and I, like you, I had Valeri coming in off the bench, say 55-60, and then having that full run of Valeri for that 30 or 35 minutes, and him being a part of that strike in the second half that puts them over the top.
What are the juice box purveyors having to say about this one?
Not much. It hasn't changed a whole lot. This morning, we'd given the numbers in the plus 140s and the 170s. Right now, Portland still plus 175 in the aggregate, plus 147 for Orlando City, and your tied after 90 minutes option right now is plus 249.
BetMGM's got 175 to the plus for Portland, 145 for Orlando. Mm-hmm. My gut feeling, I'm going to go with it, even though Portland doesn't have a clean sheet in this tournament. I think they get one here. I think it's 2-0. I think they get the clean sheet. They just frustrate Orlando. They get a goal late in the first half, and they get a goal in the last 15 to finish it off. I think 2-0 Portland is where I'm going. Some predictions in the Twitch chat. 3-2 is Sean Vergara. Portland winning. Ricky Ricardo says 2-1 Portland. Nobody's picking Orlando yet in our show. I'm really surprised by that. Everybody's very fair and balanced when it comes to the Orlando City. So I'm very surprised that nobody's expecting that they might actually win a game in a final. That is a big win for them and put them in CONCACAF.
Our Falcoholic, Mr. Green, says he's got Portland 1-0 over Orlando. His question is...
I could see that. What's the question?
Do you think doubling Nani will work for the Timbers?
Well, I don't think you double. I think it's more if you have somebody to help. You don't want Williamson to completely leave the middle zone. You definitely don't want your center back to do it. You want them to be able to clean everything up. But your instruction, I think in a lot of ways, is, okay, we see Nani cut inside so often. You've got to have your right back stay home. And I think Duval is your opportunity there. He's a veteran. I think he's going to understand the challenge here. So you have him. He's staying home. He's dealing with Nani. He is more one-on-one dealing with him. But when Nani comes inside, he's coming into Williamson's zone, and Williamson has to step to him. Williamson has to have his head on a swivel, not worry so much about drifting to the left, but he's got to know when Nani's on the ball and he comes in there, he's got to deal with that. Chara's got to pick up Pereira. If Orlando tries to send another runner there, that's where they could have some space, and Mendez will be the one to look at. If Portland does that and they shut that down, Nani's a smart enough player to recognize he's going to need another runner. Pareja will recognize that as well. They're going to start to send Mendez. But this is where the chess game plays out. Because if you see Orlando do that, all right, they attack the way we just talked about. So Orlando, Akindelli up top, you're going to be, the center backs are going to be dealing with him. Mueller on the right, you've got your left back, probably Villafaña dealing with him. Nani on the left, you've got your right back. I'm expecting Duval to deal with him. Your two central midfielders, Chara will deal with Orlando's number 10 and Pereira. Williamson will have to keep an eye on Nani to give some help when Nani comes inside of the central zone. Okay, so he's not going to help deal with Pereira. He's not going to help deal with another runner. If there's another runner, if Mendez, who's one of the holding midfielders for Orlando, or Uricel, sometimes both, but Mendez is the more likely. If Mendez steps forward, then Blanco, who you're trying to protect from doing defensive stuff, is going to have to come back and help. He's going to have to. There's just no other way around it at that point. You've got to ride that out. Now, this plays into the Timber side of things too, though, because if Orlando starts to do that, okay, you got your forward, you got your front three in the midfield, you got Mendez starting to go, Juan's going to be going, Moutinho's probably going to stay more at left back, but he's known to go at times. That means they're selling out a little bit going forward. That means they've got their two center backs, maybe the left back, and maybe their number 6 staying back. If Portland can turn them over and transition quickly with Polo's speed, with Blanco's ability on the ball, with Abobasi's speed, you can take advantage of Orlando being drawn out. And that's the chess game. Pareja knows that, and he knows that when he starts to commit more numbers, he's got to be careful. Savarese knows what he can do to draw them out as well. That's the chess game between the two managers.
You wanted an Orlando pick? We have an Orlando pick.
I mean, it's not that shocking. Okay.
Nick goes from 2-1 and changed his mind to 3-1 Orlando.
That's definitely not shocking. Nick likes to be the contrarian around here. We know this.
So, yeah, Nick goes from 2-1 to 3-1, and he changed his mind mid-selection. So 3-1 Orlando tonight from Nick.
Nick changing his mind, Nick going with Orlando here. I'm not surprised. It probably was something like
1990. Spaghetti. Ravioli.
Orlando.
Mamma mia.
Jarrett's going Orlando in penalties. Hutchinson's going with Orlando as well. Jarrett says Orlando's going to win this in penalties and then lose their first game back in regular season play, and their fan base will be can't-miss entertainment after that loss as they get PTSD. Nah, I think if they get anything out of this, their fan base will be having a honeymoon for a while. I really do. It's a new Orlando. You can put all of the old Orlando stuff in the trash can, throw it in the dumpster, light it on fire, run it off a cliff. This is not the old Orlando City anymore. Pareja's changing the personality, and that's going to translate to that fan base as well. I think the fan base is happy even if they don't win this tournament. If they win it, they're happy. They're fine. Nothing's going to give them PTSD after that point. I really disagree. Thad Dooley's throwing a yellow card to Nick. I think Ricky Ricardo is sharing that yellow card, or he might be throwing it at Jarrett, possibly. I don't know.
Tafka said that looked at the trophy, and he says you can't make the MLS's back trophy cooler than the MLS Cup or U.S. Open or even Campeones. You just can't. Its style is befitting its stature.
That's a good point. That's fine. I think you maybe could have done a little bit better with it, but it's okay. It's okay. You can drink a lot of alcohol out of it, and that's always a big point for a soccer trophy. Can you drink lots and lots of alcohol out of it? Okay, it passes the test. If you can do that, the rest of it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. That's it for predictions on our end, although in the timeline, Jason Nix sent us a photo of his SDH NWO Teespring swag that showed up at the Casa. And so
very cool.
Maybe he'll get to wear it somewhere besides his living room in the next year or so.
Well, yeah, there's that. We're all hopeful. I don't know. I hope. Also got to follow some of these things and make sure these things get sorted out. Man, I'm just checking out how people are reacting in Scotland to some of the comments about what Aberdeen and Celtic being stupid have been, and people are fired up, which is understandable. Teams that have followed their protocols are kind of a little upset right now. They should be, and it should be the same in any league. This is going to be a challenge for MLS. Look, I mean, this tournament's been great, and I think the finals is going to be another great moment for the league. I think we'll celebrate this probably in the morning, and then we're back into play in markets with fans in Dallas, in Nashville and Dallas. That's tomorrow night. We'll talk about that and how difficult things are going to start to get, because the thing that MLS is doing that we have not seen, MLB didn't ever do a bubble. The Bundesliga did a quarantine for a week before game one. MLS is doing this situation where they are going from a bubble back into the wild, but having learned from the bubble. And that's the interesting element. Do you get the recklessness that we are seeing in Major League Baseball with a few teams, that we're seeing in Scotland? Do you get that with players coming out of the situation that they're coming out of? You could say, and MLS is betting on this, that they understand how serious it is. They understand how difficult it is. That people are going to be vigilant in following all the protocols. The flip side is they've been in a bubble for this period of time, and you're going to have some people who are going to want to go out and going to want to be normal people again and could make some bad decisions. I don't know which way it goes. I really hope it's the former. I really hope that people understand how difficult this is going to be. I really, really hope that. This is one phase of the season. There's still more to come, and hopefully MLS is able to do this in the right way and make it all work. I do think the traveling in day of the game, traveling out the day of the game, it's going to have a competitive effect. Absolutely. We'll see once we get into these games what that looks like. But it's going to help a lot in terms of control and bubble and non-bubble and people being out on their own. You're not going to have the situations that you're having with some MLB teams where they're on the road for 3 days. It's going to be you're going to work for the day, and it's going to be a whole day, and you're going to come home, and you're going to sleep at home that night. And if people are responsible in their home life, the way these games are going to go, it's not going to change that. In USL, we've had some positives. We haven't had quite as many as I thought we would, but we've had some games postponed because of that. I do think you'll have games postponed in MLS. It's going to happen. It's got to happen at a very minimal number. And it's got to be something where people are very careful and responsible and vigilant. That's just what it is. Couple questions before we wrap up. Jason Nick said, should MLS have had their final on a better night than Tuesday? Or does this at least give it room to breathe, apart from bigger events, say, on Saturday or Sunday? I think it does. I think they did this by design to make sure they could get primetime ESPN coverage and make it a big destination thing. I'm okay with it. I think there's an idea that it's only big if it's on the weekend. I think the MLS TV ratings are showing in general that that's not necessarily the case. I remember the playoff ratings when they did the Tuesday and Wednesday games were, the same or better. I think that you might create some other, new opportunities by doing this. So I'm okay with it. I like it. I think it works. Let's see. What else do we have? Turner says, but will they give it the outside coverage a final deserves? And probably not. But I don't think it hurts the TV audience because it's on a Tuesday. I think it's going to do what it would do if it was any kind of a game. Maybe a little bit higher because it's on a Tuesday. Colonel on the Orlando fan base, and is a hard disagree, says the hardcore disagreeables have not wavered in spite of their success this year, and I haven't really been following them, so maybe that's the case. Those who would actually engage in a reasonable discourse are still there, but that hardcore, yikes. Colonel, if you're still with us, in what way have they not wavered? Are they still saying the team's not good? Are they still negative about the team? Because that was the element in the past that when you started to have their hardcore fan base, and I don't like the aggressive nature of their hardcore fan base. I've never been a fan of that. I think that's been fostered by the club in a very negative way early on. I do think that's going to change with the leadership that they have in place now. It's not going to be embraced in the same way it was embraced before. I think that was a very bad move by the front office and by the club as a whole. But I understood their reactions to the bad soccer that was on display that they were paying for 5 years. I understood their frustrations there. So I had no problem with that. If they're still like that about what they're seeing right now, then I don't know what they're watching. And they're not really fans of the club anymore, if that's the case. I don't get it. I don't know. They're aggressive and confrontational as ever. Now, that's a little different. If that's the case, yeah, I don't think that changes. Let me make it clear. I think in terms of their fan base embracing their team, I think that part changes. And in terms of them having a honeymoon period in terms of how they feel about results this year, I think that changes. In terms of them being the personality that they are, I hope that changes, but that's a longer-term prospect. And it's going to have to come from Luis Muzzi. It's going to have to come from Oscar Pereja. It's going to have to come to what is branded as acceptable and what's branded as unacceptable. And if they're aggressive towards Atlanta and it's just the rivalry thing, I don't mind it as much. They are the stadium that we have been cursed out the most on air, for sure. It's not even close. Actually, next is New England, which is really weird. Yeah, I think some of it's just access in New England because of where we are.
Yeah,
but yeah,
they're right underneath you with an open window, right?
Yeah, Orlando, it's seriously like every game we're getting flicked off and we're getting yelled at, and stuff's going out over the air. It's just what it is. I do like that games in Orlando do have a feel to them. It doesn't feel like a bland experience, so that's cool. I've never felt unsafe. That's good. But yeah, I don't think they're very appealing to new fans with that aggressiveness, and I hope that goes away. Turner says, Boston sports fans being crude, fake shocked face. Yeah, that's true. Cassie says that one guy in D.C. gave us the business all game in 2019. There's an aggressive element to the D.C. support as well. There's also some great elements to all the different support. I mean, even the Orlando fans and everybody. Like there's great people in every fan base, and there's probably negative folks in every fan base as well. Sean Vergara says, I just hope MLS gets the praise it deserves due to the such low positive rate during the bubble. Big risk they took and came out successful. I agree. And most of the national media is only talking about the NBA. No, the NBA gets credit. MLS gets more credit because they did it first. And they did it to a bigger degree, 24 teams involved. It is the biggest tournament. They got a Guinness World Record out of this, of the biggest event with the most number of teams involved in it, one location. It's not easy to do it. It had never been done. The WNBA gets credit for what they're doing with their bubble. The NWSL gets credit for what they did. They were the first ones, so they get even more credit. But everybody questioned if the bubble could work. It's worked. Now we're going into a different phase. And I'm with Sean. I hope that people give MLS credit for getting this part done. I have a feeling that now it is going to be pushed to the side very quickly because of the concerns about going outside the bubble. And there are concerns. There have to be. You're looking at Scotland right now. There has to be a concern. You're looking at Atletico Madrid with a couple players who tested positive. You're looking at Major League Baseball. You have to have concerns. But also, the other side, and this is what we've talked about so often, there are other considerations to trying to do business. It's called staying alive. It's called revenue. It's called doing what you can to make what you can to keep doing this and to keep people employed and to keep all of that going. It's very, very difficult to find the balance. I don't think you can do a bubble forever. Remember, they were going to be in the bubble longer and play more games in the bubble. That got pushed back on. Now are you going to have a push to go back to a bubble? I mean, just make up your minds, I don't know. You might have to. They're going to do these 6 games in 3 weeks, and they're going to reassess. I think the way they've done it, and I'd have to go through and look at every trip, but I think because of the way they've grouped everybody together, you're not looking at any multiple day trips. Everything is fly out, day of the game, go to the stadium, play. There might be a stop that you have arranged before, depending on your situations, to eat, to have a meal in a safe place. I don't know what that's going to look like team to team. It's going to really be down. I'll tell you who's going to make a lot of money right now in terms of make a lot of impact on the competitive side is your travel coordinators, your team ops people, because the ones who are smart and handle this right and make it easier for the players to just focus on playing, they're going to be the ones that you're going to see a performance difference. The ones who are haphazard and throw stuff together and look unorganized, you're going to see that too. So it's going to be travel day of, get to the stadium, play the game, shower, get on a plane, travel back. That's what it's going to look like. So your exposure is minimal. There's not much at all to the travel part. It's going to be down to these players more than anything not being in a bubble every day and being at home where they're going to have freedom, but they're also going to have responsibilities. And we will see how that gets balanced. That's the concern. That's the interesting element here. So we'll see where it goes. Game tonight, kickoff is going to be, I think, closer to 8:50, actually. The broadcast starts at 8:30. There have been requests for a watch-along.
See, you're thinking.
I mean, it's good to have requests for it.
Yeah, no question.
People going to hang out and do the watch-along here? I mean, if we're going to do a watch-along, are people going to hang out with us on Twitch tonight and watch the game with us? If so, then, yeah, we can hang out. Sean Vergara says he would. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it'll be Sean just hanging out with us on Twitch, watching the game with us. I'm sure we'll have a few other folks from the clubhouse / locker room / whatever you want to call it. Ricky Ricardo is wanting to send a wrestling down here happy birthday to Hulk Hogan. It is Hulk Hogan's birthday. I forgot he was born in Georgia.
I did not know he was born in Georgia.
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten that he was born in Georgia. We shall see. Hulk, yeah, from the the wrestling part of it, he's very influential and very big time. The off the ring side of things, maybe Hulk's a little questionable at times on lots of different things. Garbage human being is what Jason Nix says. Sorry, not sorry. I was trying to be diplomatic a little bit.
Born in Augusta, Georgia. I did not know that.
Yeah, I did not know he was born in Augusta. There's other people in wrestling I will celebrate more than Hulk. Let's put it that way. All right. We'll do a watch-along tonight. we will be back just on Twitch. So if you listen on the podcast edition, it will not be on the app. It will not go out as a podcast later. It'll just be on Twitch, twitch.tv/soccerdown here. Get your drinks of choice and be ready for that. We'll start about 8:30. So turn your notifications on, subscribe, follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/soccerdown here. And you'll watch the game on ESPN, and you'll hear us yapping about it, and we'll take your questions and your thoughts, and we'll see if Orlando can win a final. We'll see if Giovanni Savarese can win a final with Portland, and we'll see where this goes. But yeah, 8:30 tonight on twitch.tv/soccerdown here. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for all the interaction today. Good conversation. We'll be back tonight for the watch-along. We'll be back at 9 o'clock to wrap up the game and look ahead to Dallas and Nashville and the start of Phase 3 of the MLS season, kind of?
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of? We'll talk about that tomorrow morning. So, mucho platio.
Mucho platio.